Hey folks, buying a used graphics card can be a great way to save some cash when you're building a PC, especially today when the state of the used GPU market is in flux and the prices are very definitely coming down. Now, many of the videos on this channel have featured cards which I've picked up for dirt cheap, which have been partially working in some cases or even thought to be dead in others. But most of you, and quite rightly so, wouldn't touch those with a 10-foot barge pole. So what about if you found a pretty decent looking card on, say, eBay, and it arrives in a fairly good state? Take this Palit GTX 980 Jetstream. It's fairly dust free, and on the whole it runs well, but it does have the original stickers on the screws, and we know that this is a 2015 card which has never been opened up or cleaned because of that. A decent purchase for sure at the price that I paid, but if you buy something like this, should you still give it a little bit of TLC? Well, in my opinion, absolutely. So in this video, we're going to take the Jetstream apart and also show why an older, used card, even when on the surface looks really good, can benefit from a full refurb. So when I get any used card, I generally go through the motions in a pretty specific order. Firstly, I'll assess the card. Does it have any damage? Do the fans spin freely? Does it boot up at all? In the case of this card, it works fine. The fans are a little bit noisy, but there is a thick caking of dust underneath them, and while the temperatures are not really crazy, I do think there's room for improvement. So to get a baseline for performance, I went through a 3D Mark stress test which runs for about 20 minutes or so, and I set the fan speed at a static 40%. Now this is important. If you want to test the difference in temperatures after and before a refurb, you're going to need to control the ambient temperature of your room and also set the fan curve to a set level to remove that as a variable. During the initial run through, we've seen that the hotspot temperature in this configuration, it topped out roughly about 91 degrees, while the actual GPU temp was maybe sitting around about 76-77 degrees. With this baseline in place, it was then time to dismantle the card. That means removing the cooler and unplugging any PWM connections. Depending on your card, you may have additional screws that you need to search for, but taking apart a GPU, it's not really a complicated process, unless you're working with an NVIDIA Founders Edition or AMD reference card. Once everything's disassembled, you're going to want to assess the card. How does the PCB look? Is there any damage? How's the thermal pads? How is the dust build-up around the components? With everything checked out, it's time to start to maintain the card. That means removing dust and grime, removing the old thermal interface material, replacing the pads if needs be, and using some electrical contact cleaner to clean up the board. On this card, everything was fairly clean. I was able to clean all the dust and grime off of the PCB using a data vat and some electrical contact cleaner, and for the heatsink, simply running it under the tap blasts out all the grime and dust buildup, and it can be dried fairly quickly using either a radiator over an hour or so or blasting it with a hairdryer. If you do choose to actually wash your heatsinks, just please make sure that it's dry before you reassemble. Reassembly is simply the reverse order of the disassembly process, ensuring to apply a nice dollop of new thermal interface material before you screw everything back together. It's always worth visually checking a card that you've reassembled before sticking it into your computer. We had no problems here. I slotted the card in, turned it on, and it booted up at the first time of asking. But the big question is, once we've done this, does it make any difference? Well, I'm happy to report that it made quite a huge difference on this card. Running through the same 3D Mark stress test again, and that is after letting it idle for around 30 minutes, the first thing that was immediately noticeable was that idle temperatures was roughly about 3.5 degrees lower than it previously was. This is a trend that was only magnified when we started putting the card under load, with both the hotspot temperature and the GPU temperature taking much longer to plateau, while plateauing at a lower temperature level. I've put the delta for these temperatures, i.e. the delta of the GPU before and after and the hotspot, on a graph, and you can see that the difference when idle is roughly just under 4 degrees, but when we start putting the GPU under load, we're seeing roughly 6.2 degrees of difference across the whole length of the test. Moving back to the first chart, we can also see that once the test is finished and the GPU is no longer under load, the fully cleaned card with the new thermal interface material cools down much faster than it did when I received it. So all in all, we can conclude that yes, cleaning it has been really worthwhile, and it's much more thermally efficient now than when I got it. Now it's not going to make a huge difference, the temperatures weren't crazy to start with, we were not overheating, but it just means that we're going to be adding a little bit of extra longevity in the card by helping get all that heat away from the card while we're using it. So all in all then, a really worthwhile little exercise for you to do. I mean, the disassembly and reassembly process only took about 30 minutes or so, and when you're knocking over 6 degrees off your GPU's temperature under load, if you are buying used, then for the price of some new thermal interface material, it'll be quite silly not to. But we'll leave it there for today, folks. I hope you're as excited as I am about the state of the GPU market with all these used cards coming down in price, and we're going to be seeing more of this GTX 980 very soon as we put it through its paces in the latest games. For now though, I'll just say thank you very much for watching, take care, and we'll see you all in the comment section down below, and in the next video.